Clara Jennings's hands were shaking when she counted the last 3 potatoes in the cellar. 3 potatoes. 2 children. 9 days until the snow might clear enough to reach town. She pressed her palm against her chest, fighting the panic rising in her throat. William had been dead 3 winters now, and each one tried harder to kill what remained of their family. Then her son Thomas burst through the cabin door snow in his hair terror in his eyes. "Mama! There's a dead man by the creek." Clara's blood turned to ice. Subscription invitation. Before we continue this story, I'd love for you to subscribe to our channel and follow Clara's journey to the very end. And please leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I'm always amazed to see how far these stories travel. Now let's return to that frozen creek in Wyoming, 1883. Clara grabbed her shawl from the peg by the door. Her fingers trembled as she wrapped it around her shoulders, but her voice came out steady. "Show me." Thomas hesitated. Lily saw him too. She's scared, Mama. Clara found her 7-year-old daughter standing frozen by the woodpile, mittens pressed against her mouth, eyes wide as silver dollars. "Lily, sweetheart, come inside and wait by the fire." "Is he dead like Papa?" Lily whispered. The question hit Clara like a fist to the chest. She remembered too well the morning she'd found William, his body frozen stiff by the logging road, eyes open to a sky that didn't care. "I don't know yet, baby. Go inside. Thomas, take me to him." They stepped into a world transformed by winter's fury. December had buried Wyoming territory under 3 feet of snow, and the temperature had dropped to 15 below. The cold burned Clara's lungs with each breath as she followed her son toward the creek. Thomas moved fast for a 10-year-old, his small legs plowing determined paths through the drifts. He'd grown up too fast since William died. Had to. Frontier life allowed no childhood. "How far?" Clara called. "Past the big cottonwood, maybe 10 more minutes." 10 minutes in this cold could mean the difference between life and death. Clara pushed harder, ignoring the fire building in her thighs. They found him face down near the frozen creek bank, half buried in white. A tall man in a fine wool coat, torn at the shoulder, soaked with what looked like blood. His horse was nowhere to be seen. Clara dropped to her knees beside him, pressing her fingers against his neck. A pulse. Faint, but there. "He's alive," she breathed. "Mama, look." Thomas pointed at the snow around the man's body. Boot prints not his own. Signs of a struggle. Someone had dragged him here and left him to die. Clara's gut tightened. A stranger left for dead meant trouble. Whoever did this might come looking to finish the job. But the man groaned softly, and Clara made her choice. "Help me turn him over." Together they rolled him onto his back. He was massive, over 6 feet, with the solid build of a man accustomed to hard work. Dark hair matted with blood at his temple. Strong jaw beneath several days of beard. Handsome in a severe way, with lines of suffering etched around his closed eyes. "We can't carry him," Thomas said, voice small. "Then we drag him." It took nearly an hour. Clara's arms screamed in protest. Her back became a column of fire. Twice she fell to her knees, gasping, only to push herself up and keep pulling. Thomas never complained, never stopped. The boy grabbed the stranger's arm and hauled with everything he had, teeth gritted, face red with effort. When they finally reached the cabin, Lily had the fire built high and blankets spread before the hearth, just as Clara had taught her. "Is he gonna die, Mama?" Lily asked as they wrestled the stranger onto Clara's narrow bed. Clara pulled off his frozen boots, his ice-crusted coat. His skin felt like death itself. "Not if I can help it." She worked through the night. Heated water. Cleaned the wound on his head. Someone had struck him hard enough to split the skin to the bone. Spooned warm broth between his cracked lips when he could swallow. The stranger thrashed in fevered dreams, calling out names that meant nothing to Clara. "Margaret." His voice broke on the word. "Rose, I'm sorry." I'm so sorry. A wife. A child. Both lost from the grief in his voice. Clara recognized that sound. She'd made it herself alone in the barn after William's funeral when the children couldn't hear. On the second day, the fever climbed higher. Clara used the last of her precious honey to brew sweetened tea, tore up her only spare sheet for fresh bandages. Thomas watched from the loft, silent and vigilant. "What if he's a bad man?" the boy finally asked. Clara wrung out a cool cloth, placing it on the stranger's burning forehead. "Can't be bad if he's dead. Let's keep him alive long enough to find out." "What if the men who hurt him come here?" Clara didn't answer. She'd already loaded William's rifle and placed it within arm's reach. On the third morning, the stranger's eyes snapped open. Blue. Vivid blue, wild with terror. He grabbed Clara's wrist with surprising strength. "They tried to kill me," he rasped. "Don't let them find me." Then he collapsed again, hand falling away. Clara stared at her children, who watched from across the small room. Lily clutched her wooden doll. Thomas's hand rested on his father's old hunting knife tucked in his belt. What had she brought into their home, Monsieur Drag? The fever broke on the fourth day. Clara was changing the bandage on his head when he opened his eyes, clear now alert, taking in his surroundings with careful assessment. "Where am I?" "My cabin. Wyoming territory, about 8 miles east of Cedar Ridge." Clara didn't look up from her work. "You've been mostly dead for 4 days. He tried to sit up. Pain lanced across his face. "Easy," Clara said. "You took a bad beating. Cracked ribs from what I can tell. Head wound could have killed you. 4 days. And 3 nights. You talked a lot. Margaret, Rose." Clara met his eyes directly. "Who are they?" The man went still. Something shuddered behind his gaze. "My wife and daughter. They're dead." Clara nodded once, accepting the information without pity. Pity was cheap out here. Useless. "I'm Clara Jennings. The boy in the loft is Thomas. The girl hiding behind the door is Lily." She wrung out the cloth and set it aside. "Now, who are you and who wants you dead?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Direct. I appreciate that. Got no time for dancing around, mister. You brought trouble to my door. I got a right to know what kind. Jacob Mercer, ma'am." He shifted carefully, wincing. "I own the Mercer Ranch about 30 miles north." Clara's hands went still. The Mercer Ranch. One of the largest spreads in the territory. Thousands of acres, hundreds of head of cattle. She'd saved a rich man. "You're far from home, Mr. Mercer." "Was riding to the land office in Cheyenne. Papers to file for a property called the North Fork. Prime grazing land water rights." His jaw tightened. 3 men jumped me. Took my horse, my documents, left me in the snow. "Any idea who sent them?" "Garrett Stone." Clara knew the name. Everyone in Cedar Ridge did. Stone had been buying up land throughout the territory, sometimes fair, often not. Rumors of intimidation foreclosure schemes hired muscle. "Stone's been after the North Fork for years," Jacob continued. "I always refused to sell. Guess he decided to take it another way. By killing you. Man like Stone, death's just another business transaction." Clara stood, moving to the fire to check the pot of thin stew. Their food situation was growing desperate. Another mouth to feed for 4 days had stretched their supplies to breaking point. "Your people must be looking for you," she said carefully. "Maybe. Or maybe they think I'm dead." Jacob's voice carried a bitter edge. "Easier for some that way." Clara turned back to face him. "Self-pity won't heal you faster, Mr. Mercer." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise maybe, or respect. "No, ma'am. I reckon it won't." A small voice came from behind the door. Lily peeked around the frame, clutching her wooden doll. "Are you hungry? Mama's stew is good. She puts in carrots when we have them. We don't have any now, though." "Lily," Clara warned. But Jacob's expression had softened in a way Clara hadn't expected from a man with such hard eyes. "I'd be grateful for anything, Miss Lily, and I'm sorry I ate your carrots." "You didn't eat them. We ran out last week. Lily approached the bed cautiously. Mama says you were sick. I was sick once too. Mama gave me honey water. Did she give you honey water? She did. That's 'cause she loves you. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. Lily, that's not... Mama loves everybody. Lily continued oblivious. She saved a bird once, and a baby rabbit. Thomas says she's soft-hearted, but he's soft-hearted too. He just pretends he ain't. Jacob's eyes met Clara's over the child's head. Your daughter's quite the talker. She gets that from her father. The words came out before Clara could stop them, and the familiar ache followed. 3 years, and William's absence still hit her at unexpected moments. Thomas descended from the loft, positioning himself between his sister and the stranger. At 10 years old, he carried himself like a man, shoulders squared, chin raised. You well enough to answer questions, Mr. Thomas, Clara said sharply. It's all right. Jacob met the boy's suspicious gaze without flinching. Ask what you want, son. I ain't your son. Thomas's voice was flat. My father's dead. Logging accident 3 winters back. Don't need no replacement. Thomas. Clara grabbed her son's shoulder, but Jacob held up his hand. No, ma'am. He's right to be cautious. Jacob addressed the boy directly. I'm not here to replace anyone, Thomas. Your mother saved my life when she didn't have to, when it might have been safer not to. That's a debt I mean to repay, nothing more. Thomas studied him for a long moment. How you gonna repay it? You got no horse. No money, I reckon, since you said they robbed you. Can't even stand on your own 2 feet. Thomas, enough, Clara said. But something had shifted in Jacob's expression. Not anger at the boy's bluntness, something else. Something like recognition. You're right, Jacob said quietly. Right now, I've got nothing. But I won't always be flat on my back. And I always pay my debts. Thomas considered this. Then, with a curt nod, he turned and climbed back to the loft. Clara released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. I apologize for my son's manner. Don't. Jacob's voice held genuine warmth. Boy's protecting his family. That's exactly what he should be doing. He paused. He reminds me of myself at that age. Father died when I was 12. Had to grow up fast. Something tightened in Clara's chest. It ain't right, children having to carry such weight. No, ma'am. It ain't. Jacob's eyes found hers. But it makes them strong. Stronger than they know. The days that followed established a strange new rhythm. Jacob regained strength slowly, his determination fierce despite his injuries. He started small, whittling by the fire while his body healed. A wooden horse for Lily, carved from a piece of pine. A bird with wings that moved when pulled by a string. For Thomas, he carved a perfect miniature of a Colt revolver. It's just a toy, Jacob said, offering it to the boy. But a man should know the weight of responsibility before he carries the real thing. Thomas accepted it without a word. But Clara noticed him tucking it into his belt alongside his father's knife, and something in the boy's rigid posture eased just slightly. As soon as Jacob could stand without dizziness, he insisted on helping around the cabin. Clara protested he was still too weak, but the first morning she returned from tending the chickens to find a neat stack of split firewood by the door, she stopped arguing. You'll tear your stitches, she said, finding him by the woodpile, axe in hand. Already healed. He set another log on the stump. Clara, you've got 2 children, a farm to run, and winter bearing down hard. Let me help. I've managed 3 years on my own. I know you have. Jacob met her eyes. But you don't have to anymore. The words hung between them, loaded with meaning neither was ready to address. Clara turned away first. Breakfast is ready. Don't let it get cold. But that night, lying in her narrow bed, Jacob slept on a pallet by the fire, insisting he'd taken her room long enough. Clara stared at the ceiling and felt something dangerous stirring in her chest. Hope. She crushed it immediately. Hope was a luxury she couldn't afford. Hope meant expecting things that wouldn't come. Hope meant opening yourself to loss. She'd learned that lesson 3 winters ago, cradling William's frozen body in her arms. On the 7th day, a knock at the door shattered the cabin's quiet. Jacob was on his feet, instantly moving with surprising speed for a man still healing. He positioned himself between the door and Clara's children, hand reaching for the rifle, before Clara could react. "Easy," she said, recognizing the knock's rhythm. "I know who it is." She opened the door to find Reverend Samuel Hayes on the threshold, charity basket in hand and judgment in his eyes. "Mrs. Jennings." The Reverend's gaze moved past her, to Jacob standing shirtless by the fire bandages, still visible across his ribs. "I see the rumors were true." "What rumors might those be, Reverend?" "That you've taken in a strange man, an unmarried woman living alone, with—" "My children," Clara interrupted, voice cold, "who I nearly lost to starvation while your congregation discussed my immortal soul." She glanced at the basket. "Is that charity or payment to ease your conscience?" Hayes's face reddened. "There's no need for hostility, Mrs. Jennings. I'm simply concerned for your reputation. The town is talking." "Let them talk." Jacob stepped forward, pulling on his shirt. "Mrs. Jennings saved my life when I was left for dead in the snow. If that's cause for gossip, then Cedar Ridge has smaller hearts than I realized." The Reverend straightened. "And who might you be to speak on a widow's behalf?" "Jacob Mercer, Mercer Ranch." Clara watched the calculation flash across Hayes's face. The Mercer name carried weight enough to make even self-righteous preachers think twice. "Mr. Mercer, I didn't realize." Hayes set the basket down quickly, suddenly eager to leave. "Of course, if Mrs. Jennings was merely offering Christian charity to a man of your standing." "She was offering human decency," Jacob said flatly. "Something that doesn't require my standing or anyone else's approval." After the Reverend left, Clara sat heavily at the small table, exhaustion washing over her. "That'll be all over town by sundown. The widow Jennings living in sin with a strange man." "I'm sorry." Jacob's voice was rough with genuine regret. "I've made things harder for you." "You didn't make anything. Small minds did." Clara looked up at him. "But you should go back to your ranch now. You're well enough to travel. Your people will be worried." Something shifted in Jacob's expression. Pain that had nothing to do with his injuries. "And if I don't want to leave yet?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither dared name. Clara thought of Thomas's distrust, Lily's easy affection, the hope she'd tried so hard to crush growing stronger every day despite her best efforts. She should send him away. Protect her children, her reputation, what little she had left. Instead, she heard herself say, "Then I reckon you stay till you're properly healed. That head wound still needs watching." Jacob's mouth curved slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. "Thank you, Clara." It was the first time he'd used her given name. The sound of it in his deep voice made something flutter beneath her ribs. "Don't thank me yet," she said, standing abruptly. "Storm's coming. I can feel it in the air. Might be stuck with each other whether we like it or not." That night, wolves circled the chicken coop, their howls raising the hair on Clara's neck. Before she could reach for William's rifle, Jacob had taken it from its place by the hearth. "Stay inside," he told them, voice calm but brooking no argument. "That's my gun," Clara said. "Yes, ma'am. And you're needed here with the children." He checked the action with practiced ease. "I'll be back directly." He stepped into the moonlit darkness. A single shot cracked the silence. Then another. Then nothing. Clara stood frozen, heart pounding, one hand on Thomas's shoulder, the other holding Lily close. The door opened. Jacob stepped back inside, rifle still warm. 2 down. Rest scattered. He set the weapon back in its place. "They won't be back tonight, but that coop needs reinforcing. I'll handle it tomorrow." Clara's hands were trembling. Not from fear, from something else entirely. something she hadn't felt since William. "Thank you." Jacob's eyes held hers in the firelight. "A man protects what matters to him." The words settled into the cabin's warmth, into the spaces between heartbeats. Lily tugged at Jacob's sleeve. "Were you scared of the wolves?" He knelt to her level. "A little. Only fools aren't scared of wolves." "Mama says Papa wasn't scared of nothing." "Your papa sounds like a brave man." "He was." Lily clutched her wooden doll, the one Jacob had carved. "But he's gone now. Mama says he's with the angels." "I'm sure he is. My dolly's name is Margaret." Lily held it up. "Like your wife. Is she with the angels too?" Jacob went very still. Clara saw the grief flash across his face, raw and unguarded. "Yes," he said softly. "She is. She and our daughter Rose." "Then they can be friends." Lily smiled. "Papa's probably showing them around. He was real good at making friends." Jacob's eyes glistened in the firelight. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind Lily's ear. "I'm sure he is, sweetheart. I'm sure he is." Later, after the children were asleep, Clara found Jacob sitting on the porch, despite the bitter cold, staring at the stars. "You'll freeze out here." "Maybe that's fitting." His voice was hollow. "Margaret died bringing Rose into the world. Rose lasted 3 days. I wasn't there for either of them. Wasn't there when they needed me most." Clara sat beside him, close enough to feel the warmth of his body against the December air. "William died alone too. Found him frozen by the logging road at dawn. Doctor said he'd been alive for hours after the accident. Hours lying in the snow, waiting for help that never came." She swallowed hard. "I didn't know. I was home making supper, scolding Thomas for tracking mud inside, while my husband died alone in the cold." Jacob turned to look at her. "That's not your fault." "Yours isn't either." The silence stretched between them, shared grief creating a bridge where words failed. 3 years, Clara said finally. "Does it get easier?" 5 years for me. And no, not easier. Jacob's voice was rough, but different. The shape of it changes. Becomes something you carry rather than something that crushes you. "I'm tired of carrying things alone." The admission slipped out before Clara could stop it. She'd never said those words aloud. Never let anyone see the exhaustion beneath her strength. Jacob's hand found hers in the darkness. Warm, solid, present. "You don't have to." Clara didn't pull away. She sat with this man she barely knew. This stranger her children had found dying in the snow. And for the first time in 3 years, she didn't feel alone. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. The sound was mournful searching. Clara understood it perfectly. The storm hit 3 days later, burying the cabin under 4 feet of snow. For a week, they were trapped together. Clara, Jacob, and the children existing in a world of white isolation. Thomas remained wary, but watchful, studying Jacob's every move. Clara saw her son testing the man, asking questions designed to provoke. "You ever kill anyone, Mr. Mercer?" "Thomas?" Clara snapped. But Jacob answered calmly, honestly. "In the war. I was 17. Not much older than you when I held my first rifle with purpose." "Did you like it?" "No. And I hope you never have to know what it feels like." "Papa said killing changes a man." "Your papa was right." Jacob met the boy's eyes. "It takes something from you. Something you don't get back." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then, "The men who left you to die. If you find them, you're gonna kill them." "I'm going to see them brought to justice." "That's not an answer." "No," Jacob admitted. "It's not." That night, Clara found Thomas sitting by Jacob's pallet, the two of them talking in low voices. She paused outside the firelight's reach, listening. "And Pa used to say a man's worth isn't measured by what he owns, but by what he does when no one's watching." Sounds like he was a wise man. He was the best man I knew. Thomas's voice cracked slightly. I miss him every day. That's how it should be. Missing someone means they mattered. Means you love them. Jacob paused. It's okay to let other people matter too, Thomas. Doesn't mean you love your pa any less. Silence stretched. Then so quietly, Clara almost missed it. Thomas asked, You gonna leave us? Not unless your mother sends me away. She won't. She's too stubborn. Jacob chuckled. Notice that about her. She thinks she's strong enough to handle everything alone. She's not. Nobody is. Thomas's voice dropped even lower. But she'll never admit she needs help. Pride'll kill her before the winter does. Clara's throat tightened. Her 10-year-old son carrying burdens no child should bear, seeing truths she tried to hide. Then we don't let her see it as help, Jacob said carefully. We make it partnership, equals working together. Think she'd accept that? Another long pause. Then, maybe, if you don't mess it up. I'll try not to. Clara retreated silently to her bed, heart aching with love for her son, and something far more complicated for the man who was slowly becoming part of their lives. None. The storm broke on the 8th day. Clara stepped outside to find a world crystalline and merciless, beautiful and deadly. I should ride to town, Jacob said, joining her on the porch. Let my foreman know I'm alive. Get word to the marshal about Stone. You're not fully healed. Healed enough. He turned to face her. Clara, I've been here nearly 3 weeks. People will be looking for me, and you need supplies before the next storm hits. He was right. She hated that he was right. When will you leave? Tomorrow first light. I'll bring supplies back from town. Make sure you're stocked for the rest of winter. I don't need charity. Didn't offer any. Jacob's voice was firm. I'm paying a debt. Room board nursing care that's worth more than a few bags of flour. Clara wanted to argue. Instead, she found herself asking, Will you come back? Jacob stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes, the healing cut along his temple, the new lines that pain had etched around his mouth. Wild horses couldn't keep me away. That's not an answer. Yes, ma'am. It is. That night after the children were asleep, Jacob and Clara sat by the fire, the silence between them charged with everything unsaid. There's something I need to tell you, Jacob said finally. About your husband's death. Clara went very still. What about it? Before he died, Stone was buying up logging contracts throughout the territory. Anyone who wouldn't sell faced accidents, equipment failures. Some men just disappeared. Jacob's voice was heavy. I didn't connect it until you told me where William worked. But if Stone wanted that land... The implication hit Clara like a physical blow. You're saying William's death wasn't an accident. I'm saying it might not have been. I can't prove anything. Not yet. But get out. The words came out cold sharp, a blade of ice. Jacob flinched. Clara, my husband died alone in the snow because a tree fell the wrong way. That's what the foreman said. That's what I've believed for 3 years. Her voice shook with rage, and something far worse, the terror that everything she'd accepted might be a lie. You don't get to walk in here and tell me he was murdered. You don't get to... I'm not trying to hurt you. Then stop talking. They stared at each other across the firelight, the warmth between them curdling into something bitter and complicated. I'll leave first light, Jacob said quietly, and I'll find out the truth, whatever it is. He paused at the ladder to the loft where he'd been sleeping since giving Clara back her bed. But I'm coming back, Clara, whether you want me to or not. Some debts can't be paid with flour and firewood. He climbed to the loft without another word. Clara sat alone by the dying fire, William's face swimming before her eyes, his laugh, his hands. The way he'd kissed her goodbye that last morning, not knowing it was goodbye. If Stone had killed him? If William had been murdered? Clara pressed her fist against her mouth, stifling the sound that wanted to escape. Not grief, she was intimate with grief. This was something darker, rage, pure burning righteous rage. She sat there until dawn, feeding the fire, stoking the flames, letting the heat build inside her until it matched the inferno in her heart. When Jacob descended at first light, he found her standing by the door, his coat in her hands. "Find out the truth," she said, her voice steady, despite the storm in her eyes. "And when you do, you tell me first. Before the marshal, before anyone. I have a right to know what really happened to my husband." Jacob took the coat, his fingers brushing hers. "You have my word." "Words are cheap, Mr. Mercer." "Yes, ma'am, they are." He held her gaze. "That's why I intend to back mine with action." He stepped off the porch into the snow, heading toward the makeshift shelter where his borrowed horse waited. At the edge of the clearing, he turned back. Thomas and Lily had appeared in the doorway, watching him go. Thomas stood rigid, face carefully blank. Lily waved frantically, her other hand clutching the wooden horse Jacob had carved. "Come back soon, Mr. Jacob," she called. "You promised—" "I don't break promises, Miss Lily." Jacob's eyes found Clara's one last time. Something passed between them, understanding, grief, determination, and beneath it all, the fragile ember of something neither was ready to name. Then he turned his horse toward town and rode away into the white silence of the Wyoming winter. Clara stood in the doorway, watching until he disappeared over the ridge. "Is he coming back, Mama?" Lily asked. Clara thought of William frozen in the snow, of Stone buying up land with blood money, of Jacob Mercer riding toward answers that might destroy everything she thought she knew. "I don't know, baby," she said honestly. "I truly don't know." But somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the rage and the fear and the grief, that dangerous ember of hope refused to die. The days after Jacob left stretched like taffy, slow and sticky and suffocating. Clara threw herself into work, patching the chicken coop, hauling water from the frozen creek, mending clothes by firelight until her eyes burned. Anything to keep her hands busy. Anything to keep her mind from circling back to those words. Stone was buying up logging contracts. Anyone who wouldn't sell faced accidents. She hadn't slept more than a few hours since Jacob rode away. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw William's face. Not frozen and blue as she'd found him, but alive and laughing the way he'd looked that last morning when he'd kissed her goodbye. "Don't wait up for me, Clara Bear. Might be late." She hadn't waited up. She'd gone to bed early, exhausted from chasing Lily through the snow, slept straight through until dawn, when the foreman came knocking with his hat in his hands and grief in his eyes. What if William had called out for her in those final hours? What if he'd died wondering why she didn't come? What if it hadn't been an accident at all? "Mama?" Clara startled, nearly dropping the pot she'd been scrubbing. Thomas stood at the table watching her with those two old eyes. "You've been washing that pot for 10 minutes. She looked down. The pot was spotless, had been for some time. Her hands were red and raw from the cold water. "Just thinking." "About what Mr. Mercer said. About Pa." Clara set the pot down carefully. "You heard that? Sound carries in a cabin this small." Thomas moved closer, his voice dropping. "Is it true? Did someone kill Pa?" "I don't know." The words scraped her throat like broken glass. "I don't know anything for certain." "But you think it might be true." Clara looked at her son, this boy, who had become a man before his time, who carried his father's knife and his father's burdens, and asked questions that deserved honest answers. "I think," she said slowly, "that your father was a good man who wouldn't sell what wasn't for sale, and I think there are bad men in this territory who don't take no for an answer." Thomas's jaw tightened. "If someone killed Pa, I'll find them. I'll make them pay." No. Clara grabbed his shoulders, forcing him to meet her eyes. You listen to me, Thomas William Jennings. Vengeance is a poison that kills the one who drinks it. Your father wouldn't want that for you. Pa would want justice. Justice and vengeance aren't the same thing. Clara softened her grip. If Stone did this, if he took your father from us, then we let the law handle it. We let Jacob handle it. You trust him, Mr. Mercer. Did she? Clara had asked herself that question 100 times since he'd ridden away. She'd known him less than a month, knew almost nothing about him except the grief he carried and the way he looked at her children with something like hunger, not threatening, but starving. The hunger of a man who'd lost everything and found something worth wanting again. I trust that he has no reason to lie to us, she said finally. And I trust that he owes us a debt he means to pay. Thomas pulled away from her grip. Debts can be paid and forgotten. Once he's square with us, what's to keep him from riding off and never coming back? Nothing. Clara's voice was steady despite the ache in her chest. Not a single thing in this world. That's why you can't count on anyone but yourself and God, Thomas. People leave. People die. People let you down. The only one who'll always be there for you is you. Her son studied her for a long moment. That's a lonely way to live, Mama. Maybe. But it's honest. Thomas turned toward the door, grabbing his coat from the peg. I'm going to check the snares. Lily's playing in the loft. Be careful. He paused at the threshold. Mama. For what it's worth, I think he'll come back. Mr. Mercer, he looks at you the way Pa used to look at you. Like you're something precious he's afraid to break. Then he was gone, the door shutting behind him, leaving Clara alone with the ghost of her husband and the memory of Jacob Mercer's blue eyes. The first sign of trouble came 4 days later. Clara had bundled the children into the wagon for the long ride to Cedar Ridge. They needed supplies, badly flour salt coffee medicine. The list was long, and her purse was short, but she'd managed to scrape together enough eggs and preserves to trade. The ride took 3 hours in the frozen ruts. By the time they reached town, Clara's fingers were numb despite her gloves, and Lily had fallen asleep against Thomas's shoulder. Something was wrong. Clara felt it the moment the wagon rolled onto Main Street. People were watching. Not the usual glances of recognition, the nods and waves she'd grown accustomed to over 7 years in Cedar Ridge. These were different. Hard stares, turned backs, women pulling their children close as the wagon passed. Clara tied up outside the general store, lifting Lily down, while Thomas secured the horses. Stay close, she murmured. Both of you. Inside the store fell silent. 3 women at the fabric counter stopped mid-conversation, their faces closing like doors. Clara lifted her chin and approached the counter where Harold Miller stood with his arms crossed. Morning, Mr. Miller. I need flour salt coffee and whatever medicine you have for fever. Can't help you, Mrs. Jennings. Clara blinked. Excuse me? Said I can't help you. Miller's voice was flat, his eyes avoiding hers. Store's out of what you need. The flour barrel's right there. I can see it from here. Out of what you need. Miller enunciated each word like she was slow. Maybe try the store in Willow Creek. Might have better luck there. Behind her, one of the women snickered. Clara recognized the voice, Martha Pritchard, the banker's wife. I hear Willow Creek is quite friendly to women of flexible morals. Heat flooded Clara's face. I beg your pardon. Martha approached her smile sharp as a razor. Word is, you've been entertaining a gentleman caller at your homestead, a man who isn't your husband, in front of your poor children no less. Mr. Mercer was injured. I nursed him back to health. Is that what they're calling it now? Martha's laugh was ugly. Nursing! Clara's hands clenched at her sides. He was dying in the snow. My son found him. What was I supposed to do? Leave him to freeze? A decent woman would have sent for the doctor. A decent woman wouldn't have taken a strange man into her home, into her bed. He slept by the fire. Clara's voice shook with rage. On a pallet, while I slept in my own room with my children. That's not what Reverend Hayes told us. Another woman spoke up, Edith Cole, the schoolteacher's wife. He said he saw the man half-dressed in your cabin, bold as brass. He was injured. I was changing his bandages. How convenient. Clara felt Thomas move closer, his small body rigid with anger. Lily had pressed herself against Clara's leg, confused and frightened by the hostile faces. I don't owe any of you an explanation, Clara said, her voice steadying. I've lived in this town for 7 years. I've been a good neighbor, a good mother, a faithful wife to William until the day he died. If you want to believe gossip over the truth, that's your choice. But I came here to buy supplies for my children, and I have money to pay. She placed coins on the counter. Miller stared at them like they were poisoned. I said, we're out. And I said I can see the flour barrel from here. Miller's face reddened. You want me to call the sheriff? Have you removed for causing a disturbance? I want you to sell me flour like you've done every month for 7 years. Times change, Mrs. Jennings. People change. Miller swept the coins back toward her. Take your money elsewhere. We don't serve your kind here. Clara stood frozen, humiliation burning through her like wildfire. 7 years. 7 years of buying supplies in this store, trading eggs, making small talk about weather and crops and children. 7 years erased by a few days of gossip. She gathered her coins with trembling hands. Come on, children. They walked out into the bright winter sunlight, the store's silence following them like a curse. Mama, Lily whispered. Why were those ladies mean to you? Clara couldn't answer. Her throat had closed around the words. Thomas answered instead, his voice hard as stone. Because people are stupid, Lily, and cruel, and they believe lies because the truth is too boring. They were halfway to the wagon when a man stepped into their path. Clara's blood went cold. She recognized him instantly. Silas Kane, Garrett Stone's right-hand man. A thick-necked brute with dead eyes and a reputation for violence. Mrs. Jennings. He touched the brim of his hat, the gesture somehow mocking. Mr. Stone sends his regards. I have nothing to say to Mr. Stone. That's fine. He has something to say to you. Kane's smile didn't reach his eyes. He's heard you've been sheltering a man named Mercer. Nursing him back to health, they say. Mr. Mercer left nearly a week ago. Did he now? Kane tilted his head. Thing is, Mrs. Jennings, Mr. Mercer, has some papers that belong to Mr. Stone. Property deeds, you might say. If those papers happen to turn up at your homestead. There are no papers at my homestead. Well, that's good. That's real good. Kane stepped closer, lowering his voice. Because Mr. Stone would hate for anything unfortunate to happen to a pretty widow and her little ones. Winter's a dangerous time. Accidents happen. Fires, wolves, a woman alone out there. He shook his head sadly. Anything could go wrong. Thomas moved between Kane and his mother, his hand dropping to his father's knife. Get away from us. Kane laughed, the sound devoid of humor. Got some fight in him, don't he? Just like his daddy. He met Clara's eyes, and the threat in his gaze was unmistakable. William Jennings had fight too. Look where it got him. Clara's world narrowed to a single point of cold fury. What did you say? Nothing at all, ma'am. Just making conversation. Kane tipped his hat again. You have a safe ride home now. Mind those icy roads. Never know when a wheel might slip. He walked away whistling, leaving Clara standing in the middle of Main Street, with her children pressed close, and her heart pounding like a war drum. Thomas looked up at her. He killed Pa. He just as good as admitted it. I know. Clara's voice was barely a whisper. I know. What do we do? Clara looked at the town around them, The people who'd turned their backs, the store that wouldn't sell her flour, the church where she'd married William and baptized her children, now as unwelcoming as a locked door. "We go home," she said. "And we wait." For what? For Jacob Mercer to keep his promise. The ride home was silent. Lily fell asleep again, exhausted by fear she couldn't name. Thomas sat rigid beside Clara, his hand never leaving his knife. 3 miles from home, they found the first sign. Clara pulled the horses to a stop, staring at the crude message painted on a wooden board nailed to a tree. "Harlot. Go home." Below it, someone had drawn a stick figure hanging from a noose. Thomas jumped down before Clara could stop him, tearing the sign from the tree with savage fury. He hurled it into the snow, then stomped on it until the wood splintered. "Thomas? They can't do this." His voice cracked, childhood and manhood warring in his tone. "They can't treat you like this. You didn't do anything wrong." "I know, baby." "Then why? Why do they hate us?" Clara climbed down from the wagon, pulling her son into her arms. He resisted for a moment, then crumpled against her, shaking with rage and grief. "Because they're scared," Clara murmured against his hair. "Scared people do terrible things. They find someone to blame, someone to punish, so they don't have to face their own fear." "That's stupid." "Yes, it is." She pulled back, cupping his face in her hands. "But we're not going to let them break us. We're Jennings. Your father built that homestead with his own 2 hands. He's buried on that land. No amount of signs or whispers or locked doors is going to drive us away." Thomas wiped his eyes angrily. "What if they do something worse?" "Then we'll handle it, together." Clara kissed his forehead. "Now help me get your sister home. It's going to be dark soon." They reached the cabin as the sun touched the western mountains. Clara was unhitching the horses when she saw it. The chicken coop. Demolished. Splintered wood scattered across the snow feathers everywhere, and the bodies of her laying hens strewn like broken dolls. All 12 of them. Necks wrung. Left for her to find. Lily screamed. Clara caught her daughter before she could run toward the carnage, holding the child's face against her chest. "Don't look, baby. Don't look." "The chickens. Mama, the chickens." "I know, sweetheart. I know." Thomas walked toward the coop, his face white as the snow around him. He knelt beside one of the hens, Clara's best layer, the one Lily had named Buttercup, and touched her still warm feathers. "They were here recently," he said, his voice flat. "Within the last few hours. While we were in town." Clara felt sick. They'd planned it, waited for her to leave, then struck when the homestead was empty. "Probably watching us the whole time." Thomas looked up. "There's a note." Clara set Lily down gently. "Stay here, baby. Don't move." The note was nailed to the coop's one remaining wall, the same crude hand as the sign on the tree. "Next time it's the house. Get out while you can." Clara read it twice, then tore it down and stuffed it in her pocket. Her children didn't need to see the words. They'd already seen too much. "What did it say?" Thomas asked. "Nothing that matters." "Mama, I said it doesn't matter." Clara's voice came out sharper than she intended. She softened it with effort. "Help me clean this up before it gets dark. Lily, I need you to go inside and start a fire. Can you do that for me?" Her daughter nodded, tears streaming down her face, and stumbled toward the cabin. Mother and son worked in silence, gathering the dead birds, piling the broken wood. The hens had been Clara's insurance eggs to trade meat if things got desperate. Without them, winter had just gotten a lot harder. "We should leave," Thomas said quietly. "Go somewhere they can't find us." "And go where?" "This is our home, Thomas. The only home you've ever known. Home doesn't matter if we're dead." Clara stopped a dead hen in her hands and looked at her son. Really looked at him. The fear in his eyes barely contained. The way he kept glancing toward the tree line, expecting more men to emerge. "Your father fought for this land," she said. "Bled for it. Died for it, maybe. If we run now, we let them win. We let the men who might have killed him take everything he built. Pa wouldn't want us to die for dirt. No, he wouldn't. Clara set down the hen and crossed to her son, taking his cold hands in hers. But he'd want us to stand up for what's right. He'd want us to fight. Not with guns and fists we'd lose that battle, but with stubbornness, with faith, with the knowledge that we've done nothing wrong, and eventually the truth will out. Thomas shook his head. That's a nice story, Mama, but stories don't stop bullets. No, they don't. Clara squeezed his hands. But Jacob Mercer might. If he comes back. He'll come back. How do you know? Clara didn't have an answer. She only had hope, that dangerous, stubborn hope that refused to die no matter how hard she tried to smother it. They finished the cleanup by lantern light, burying the hens in a shallow trench behind the barn. Lily watched from the window, her small face pressed against the cold glass. That night, Clara didn't sleep. She sat by the fire with William's rifle across her lap, watching the door, listening for footsteps that never came. Around midnight, Thomas crept down from the loft and sat beside her. I can keep watch, he offered. You need to rest. I'm fine. You're not fine. You haven't slept in days. Thomas took the rifle from her hands before she could protest. I know how to use this. Pa taught me. Clara studied her son in the firelight, his serious face, his steady hands, the set of his jaw that was pure William. Wake me if you hear anything. I will. She retreated to her bed, but couldn't close her eyes. Instead, she lay staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind and the creak of the cabin and her son's quiet breathing by the fire. William's face swam before her. Not the frozen mask of death, but alive and warm the way he'd looked on their wedding day. I'm scared, Will, she whispered into the darkness. I don't know if I can do this alone. No answer came. The dead kept their own counsel. But somewhere in the deepest part of her heart, where hope still flickered like a candle in the wind, Clara heard a voice that might have been William's. You're not alone. You never were. 3 more days passed. 3 days of jumping at shadows, of scanning the tree line for movement, of sleeping in shifts with the rifle always within reach. Then on the 4th day, Clara heard hoofbeats. She was at the window instantly, rifle raised, heart pounding. Thomas appeared beside her, knife in hand. 2 riders emerged from the trees. Clara's finger tightened on the trigger, then loosened as she recognized the tall figure in front. Jacob Mercer rode into the clearing like an answer to a prayer she hadn't known she was praying. Beside him rode another man, older, weathered, with dark eyes that took in everything and gave nothing away. He moved with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to violence. Clara set down the rifle and stepped onto the porch, wrapping her shawl tight against the cold. Jacob dismounted before his horse, fully stopped, crossing to her in 3 long strides. He took her hands in his eyes searching her face. I came as fast as I could. Are you hurt? The children. We're fine. The lie came automatically. Clara forced herself to amend it. Scared, but fine. Jacob's jaw tightened. I heard what happened in town, the store, the signs, and your chickens. He shook his head, fury barely contained. I should have been here. You couldn't have known. I should have known. Stone's been escalating for weeks, burning homesteads, threatening families. Jacob's grip on her hands tightened. I found proof, Clara. Stone had your husband killed. One of his men confessed, the same man who left me in the snow. William wouldn't sell the water rights Stone wanted, so Stone had him murdered and made it look like an accident. Clara had known. Had suspected since the moment Jacob first spoke the words. But hearing it confirmed, spoken aloud in the cold morning air, made it real in a way that stole her breath. Who? The word came out barely audible. Who killed him? Silas Kane. Stone's right hand. Kane's face flashed through Clara's mind. His mocking smile, his dead eyes, the way he'd touched his hat like a gentleman while threatening her children. William Jennings had fight too. Look where it got him. Where is he now? In custody. U.S. Marshal arrived from Cheyenne this morning. Kane's confessing everything in exchange for avoiding the noose. Jacob's voice gentled. Stone's being arrested as we speak. His whole operation is coming down. Clara should have felt relief. Should have felt vindicated, perhaps even triumphant. Instead, she felt hollow. Empty. Like someone had scooped out her insides and left nothing but the shell. 3 years, she whispered. 3 years I believed it was an accident. 3 years I blamed myself for not going to look for him sooner, for sleeping through the night while he died alone in the snow. Her voice cracked. And the whole time a man in town was laughing at me, knowing what he'd done, watching me struggle and starve and suffer. Clara! I hate him. The words came out raw, ugly, true. I hate Garrett Stone more than I've ever hated anyone or anything in my life. I want him to suffer. I want him to feel what I felt, what my children felt. I want him to die alone and cold and scared the way William did. Jacob said nothing. He simply pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her as she shook with rage and grief, and 3 years of suppressed pain finally breaking free. Thomas appeared in the doorway watching. His face was pale but dry. Mr. Mercer, he said, is it true about Pa? Jacob met the boy's eyes over Clara's head. It's true. I'm sorry. Thomas nodded once, slowly. Something shifted in his expression, not softening exactly, but settling. Like a weight he'd been carrying had finally found somewhere to rest. What happens now? Now Stone faces justice. The territorial judge has the evidence. There'll be a trial. And us? What happens to us? Clara pulled back from Jacob's arms, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. She looked at her son, then at the man who'd ridden through the snow to tell her the truth about her husband's death. I don't know, she admitted. I truly don't know. The older man who'd ridden in with Jacob finally dismounted, approaching the porch with careful, measured steps. Up close, Clara could see the scars on his hands, the watchful intelligence in his dark eyes. Ma'am? He touched the brim of his hat. Name's Nathan Crow. I work for Mr. Mercer. Clara noticed the roughness in his voice, the way he formed words with careful deliberation. Mr. Crow. Nathan don't speak much, Jacob said. Lost his voice years back. But he hears everything, and there's no one I trust more to watch your back. Watch my back. Stone's arrested, but he's got friends. Desperate men who might think hurting you would hurt me. Jacob's expression was grim. Nathan's going to stay nearby until this is settled. You won't see him unless you need to, but he'll be there. Clara wanted to protest. Wanted to insist she didn't need protection, didn't need anyone's help. But she thought of the destroyed chicken coop, the threatening notes, Lily's screams, and Thomas's white face. Thank you, she said instead. Both of you. Jacob reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was tender, intimate, and Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. There's something else, he said quietly. Something I need to tell you before things go further. What is it? Jacob glanced at Nathan, who nodded once and stepped away, leading the horses toward the barn to give them privacy. When I was lying in that snow dying, I made a deal with God. Told him if he let me live, I'd do something meaningful with whatever time I had left. Stop wasting years burying myself in work, hiding from anything that mattered. Clara's heart beat faster. Jacob, let me finish, please. He took her hands again, his blue eyes intense. When I woke up in your cabin, I thought God had made a mistake, given me a second chance I didn't deserve. But the more time I spent here with you and your children, the more I understood what he was trying to tell me. What was he telling you? That family isn't blood, it's choice. It's the people you decide to let in, the people you decide to fight for. Jacob's voice roughened. I've spent 5 years pushing everyone away because losing Margaret and Rose nearly destroyed me. I told myself I was protecting myself. Really, I was just dying slower. Clara's vision blurred with tears. I know that feeling. I know you do. That's why... He paused, seeming to gather courage. That's why I'm not going to ask you for anything right now. Not until Stone is dealt with, not until your husband's death is properly mourned and avenged. You deserve time to process all of this. But when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I want you to know that my door is open, my heart is open. Whatever shape that takes friendship or something more, I'll be grateful for anything you're willing to give. Clara stood speechless. In 20 years of living, she'd never heard a man speak with such vulnerability. William had loved her fiercely, but he'd shown it through action more than words. This raw honesty was something different, something that cracked open a door she'd thought welded shut. You barely know me, she finally managed. I know you saved a stranger's life when it would have been safer to walk away. I know you raised 2 remarkable children on your own while the world tried to grind you down. I know you're stubborn as a mule and twice as proud, and you've got a temper that could melt snow. Jacob smiled slightly. I know enough. I might not ever be ready. I might be broken beyond fixing. Then we'll be broken together. He squeezed her hands. I'm not asking for a promise, Clara, just a possibility. Clara looked at this man, this stranger her son had found dying in the snow, and felt the ice around her heart crack a little more. A possibility, she repeated slowly. I think I can manage that. Jacob's smile widened, reaching his eyes for the first time since she'd known him. That's all I ask. From inside the cabin, Lily's voice called out, Mama, is Mr. Jacob staying for supper? Clara laughed, the sound rusty and strange in her own ears. How long had it been since she'd laughed? Sounds like you've been summoned, she said. I'd better answer. Your daughter's got a powerful will. She gets that from her father. I was going to say from her mother. They walked into the cabin together, where Lily launched herself at Jacob's legs, and Thomas watched from the corner with cautious, hopeful eyes. Outside, Nathan Crow settled into the shadows of the tree line, silent and watchful. And somewhere in the direction of Cedar Ridge, Garrett Stone sat in a jail cell, contemplating the ruin of his empire and the noose that awaited him. But in the small cabin on the edge of nowhere, warmth flickered in the hearth, and something like hope began to grow from frozen ground. Supper that night was the closest thing to normal Clara had felt in weeks. Lily chattered endlessly about the wooden animals Jacob had carved, lining them up on the table between bites of rabbit stew. Thomas remained quiet but watchful, his hostility softening into something more like cautious acceptance. Jacob ate like a man who'd forgotten what home-cooked meals tasted like. Clara caught herself watching the way his hands moved, the way he listened to Lily's rambling stories with genuine attention, the way he answered Thomas's pointed questions without condescension. Mr. Jacob, Lily said suddenly. Are you going to marry Mama? Clara choked on her coffee. Thomas froze with his spoon halfway to his mouth. Jacob set down his fork carefully. Why do you ask that, Miss Lily? Because Tommy Henderson's mama got married again after his pa died, and now Tommy has a new pa who takes him fishing. Lily tilted her head. I never been fishing. Papa was going to teach me, but then he went to heaven. The silence stretched tight as a bowstring. Clara found her voice first. Lily, that's not an appropriate question to ask. Why not? Because... Clara trailed off, unable to form a suitable answer for a 7-year-old. Jacob leaned forward, meeting Lily's eyes with the same seriousness he'd use with an adult. Marriage is a big decision, Miss Lily. It's not something folks rush into. But I can tell you this, whatever happens between your mama and me, I'd be honored to teach you to fish. If she'll allow it. Lily beamed. Can he, Mama? Can he teach me to fish? Clara looked at Jacob, at the hope in her daughter's face, at Thomas's carefully neutral expression that didn't quite hide his interest. "We'll see," she said finally. "When the weather warms." It was the closest thing to a promise she could offer. Jacob accepted it with a small nod, understanding everything she couldn't say. After supper, Clara walked Jacob to the porch while the children cleaned up inside. The night air bit at her cheeks, but she welcomed the cold. It kept her sharp, kept her from saying things she wasn't ready to mean. "Thank you," she said, "for how you handled Lily's question. She deserves honesty. They both do. What you said about marriage, did you mean it?" Jacob turned to face her fully. "I meant every word I've said to you, Clara, but I also meant what I said earlier. I won't push. Won't ask for more than you're willing to give. And if I'm never willing, then I'll learn to live with friendship. It's more than I had a month ago." Clara studied him in the starlight, this man who'd stumbled into her life half dead and somehow become essential to it. The thought terrified her. "I need to ask you something," she said. "And I need you to answer honestly. Always. When Stone's trial is over, when everything's settled, what happens to you? You've got a ranch to run, thousands of acres, a whole life 30 miles north of here." Clara's voice steadied despite the trembling in her chest. "Are you going to ride away and visit once a month like some distant uncle? Because if that's what this is, I need to know now, before my children get more attached than they already are." Jacob was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "My ranch has been my whole life for 15 years. Built it from nothing. After the war, poured everything into it after Margaret died. It's successful because I made it successful. Because I had nothing else." He stepped closer, close enough that Clara could feel the warmth of him despite the cold. "But these past weeks staying here with you and Thomas and Lily, I've remembered what success is supposed to be for. It's supposed to buy you a life worth living, not just more land and more cattle and more empty rooms. That's not an answer. The answer is that I don't know exactly what the future holds, but I know I don't want to live it alone anymore. And I know that whatever we build together, if you'll let me build it, won't be something I ride away from once a month." Clara searched his face for doubt, for deception, for the false promises she'd learned to expect from a world that had given her nothing but grief. She found only sincerity. "I believe you," she said quietly. "God help me, I believe you." Jacob raised his hand, brushing his knuckles against her cheek. "That's a start." The moment stretched between them, weighted with possibility. Clara felt herself leaning toward him, drawn by something stronger than logic or fear. A wolf howled in the distance, breaking the spell. Clara stepped back, cheeks flushing. "You should go. It's late, and the children will wonder." "I'll be back tomorrow. Nathan's watching from the ridge tonight." "I know. I can feel him out there." Jacob smiled. "He has that effect on people." He mounted his horse, gathering the reins. At the edge of the clearing, he turned back. "Clara. Yes. Whatever happens with Stone, whatever comes next, I'm glad I stumbled into that snow. I'm glad your son found me." Before she could respond, he disappeared into the darkness, leaving Clara alone on the porch with her racing heart and the echo of possibilities she'd thought forever beyond her reach. The next morning brought trouble. Clara was feeding the surviving livestock, 2 horses and the old milk cow, when Nathan Crow emerged from the tree line, moving fast. His weathered face was tighter than usual, his dark eyes sharp with warning. "What is it?" Nathan made a series of quick hand gestures that Clara didn't understand, then pulled a scrap of paper from his pocket and scrawled 3 words. "Men coming. Hide children." Clara's blood went cold. "How many?" Nathan held up 6 fingers. "Stone's men." A nod. "Is Jacob?" Nathan shook his head, already moving toward the house. Clara followed, her mind racing. 6 men against 1 Nathan Crow. The odds were impossible. Inside, Thomas and Lily were eating breakfast. Clara forced her voice to remain calm. "Thomas, take your sister to the root cellar. Now." Thomas looked up sharply, reading the fear in his mother's face. He didn't ask questions. "Come on, Lily." "But I'm not finished." "Now, Lily." Thomas grabbed his sister's hand and the lantern by the door. "Stay quiet and don't come out until Mama says." They disappeared through the trap door in the kitchen floor. Clara slammed it shut and dragged the heavy table over it, then grabbed William's rifle from its place by the door. Nathan had positioned himself by the window, his own rifle ready. He caught Clara's eye and gestured toward the back door. "You want me to go out the back?" He shook his head, pointed at her, then at the floor. "Stay here. I'm not hiding while you—" Nathan's expression silenced her. He pointed at the trap door, at the rifle in her hands, at the window where the first riders were now visible through the trees. The message was clear. If he fell, she was the last line of defense. Clara took position behind the heavy oak sideboard rifle trained on the front door. Her hands were steady. Her heart was not. The riders emerged into the clearing, 6 men, just as Nathan had warned. Clara recognized 2 of them from town. The others were strangers, hard-eyed men with the look of hired guns. The leader pulled his horse up short of the porch. "Mrs. Jennings, we know you're in there. We just want to talk." Clara said nothing. "Name's Colt Wallace. I work for Mr. Stone, or I did before the marshal hauled him off in chains." Wallace's voice carried the false friendliness of a snake offering an apple. "See, thing is, Mr. Stone had certain documents. Property deeds, banknotes, things of value. Word is your friend Mercer knows where they are. Word is he might have told you." Still, Clara remained silent. Through the window she could see Nathan crouched in the shadows of the barn, invisible to the riders, but not to her. "Here's my offer, Mrs. Jennings. You tell us where those documents are and we ride away peaceful. No harm to you or your young'uns. Stone's finished either way, we ain't fools enough to think otherwise. But those documents are worth money to certain parties, and we aim to collect before the law does." Clara's finger tightened on the trigger. "I don't know anything about any documents." "Now see, I don't believe that." Wallace swung down from his horse, approaching the porch with his hands raised in false surrender. "Mercer spent weeks in your cabin. Man talks when he's feverish. You nursed him back to health, you must have heard something. He talked about his dead wife and daughter, nothing else. I really wish you'd cooperate, ma'am. I truly do." Wallace's tone shifted, shedding its pretense of civility. "Because my boys here ain't as patient as I am, and we've got all day." One of the other men dismounted, walking toward the barn. "I'll check the outbuildings." Nathan exploded from the shadows like a thunderbolt. The man went down without a sound, Nathan's knife finding his throat before he could cry out. The remaining riders scattered, drawing weapons, firing wild. Clara dropped behind the sideboard as a bullet shattered the window above her head. Glass rained down. Another shot splintered the doorframe. She raised up, sighted down the rifle barrel, and fired. One of the riders clutched his shoulder and fell from his horse. Return fire sent her back down, heart hammering. She could hear Nathan's rifle, now methodical and deadly, picking off targets with terrible precision. But there were too many of them. Wallace kicked in, the front door, pistol raised. Clara swung the rifle toward him, but he was faster. The gun flew from her hands, and Wallace's backhand sent her sprawling. "Where are those documents?" He stood over her pistol, aimed at her face. "Last chance, Mrs. Jennings." "I told you I don't know." "Wrong answer." A small shape launched from the kitchen doorway. Thomas, his father's knife glinting in his hand, a war cry tearing from his young throat. Wallace spun, caught off guard. Thomas's blade sliced his arm before the man could react. Wallace cursed, backhanding the boy hard enough to send him crashing into the wall. "Thomas!" Clara screamed, scrambling toward her son. Wallace's boot caught her in the ribs. Pain exploded through her chest. She collapsed, gasping. "Little bastard cut me." Wallace examined his bleeding arm, then trained his pistol on Thomas, who lay dazed against the wall. "Maybe I'll start with him. Teach you what happens when—" The bullet took Wallace in the chest before he could finish the sentence. Jacob Mercer stood in the shattered doorway, still smoking rifle in his hands, face carved from stone. "Get away from them." Wallace staggered, looked down at the spreading crimson on his shirt, then collapsed. He didn't get up. Outside, the gunfire had stopped. Clara heard horses fleeing Nathan's rifle, speaking one final time, then silence. Jacob crossed the room in 3 strides, kneeling beside Clara. "Are you hurt?" "Thomas." "I'm okay, Mama." Thomas pushed himself upright, wincing. Blood trickled from his lip where Wallace had struck him. "I'm okay." Lily's voice rose from beneath the kitchen table, muffled by the trapdoor. "Mama, Mama, what's happening?" Clara felt tears streaming down her face as she pulled her son close. "It's over, baby. We're safe. It's over." Jacob helped her to her feet, supporting her weight when her legs threatened to give way. His arm around her waist was the only thing keeping her upright. "How did you know?" she managed. "Nathan signaled me at dawn. I rode hard." Jacob's voice was rough with the aftermath of violence and fear. "I should have been here sooner. I should have—" "You were here when it mattered." Clara gripped his shirt, grounding herself in his solid presence. "You were here." Nathan appeared in the doorway, blood on his sleeve, but moving under his own power. He surveyed the room, the body on the floor. Thomas's battered face, Clara's tear-streaked cheeks. Then he nodded once, the highest praise the silent man ever offered, and disappeared back outside to deal with the aftermath. Thomas pulled away from his mother's embrace, straightening his shoulders with visible effort. "I tried to protect you, like Pa would have." Clara cupped her son's face, tears still falling. "You were so brave, so incredibly brave, but you scared me half to death. I couldn't let him hurt you. I know, baby, I know." Jacob knelt beside the boy, his expression serious. "That took courage, what you did. Charging a grown man with nothing but a knife. Your father would be proud." Thomas met Jacob's eyes. Something passed between them, an understanding that transcended words. "I thought I was gonna die," Thomas admitted quietly. "But I couldn't just hide. I couldn't let him hurt my family. That's what makes it courage, doing what needs doing even when you're scared." Jacob placed his hand on Thomas's shoulder. "You've got the heart of a warrior, son. Now we just need to work on your timing." Thomas almost smiled. "You'll teach me, every day if you'll let me, how to fight, how to shoot, how to protect the people you love, the right way." "I'd like that." Clara watched the exchange through blurred vision. Something fundamental had shifted not just between Thomas and Jacob, but in the fabric of their little family. The walls her son had built against this stranger were crumbling, replaced by something that looked dangerously like trust. Lily emerged from the root cellar, dusty and tear-streaked, launching herself at Jacob's legs. "I was so scared I heard the loud noises, and Tommy told me to stay quiet. But I wanted to come help and—" Jacob scooped her up, holding her close. "You were very brave, Miss Lily. You did exactly right." "Is the bad man gone?" "Yes, sweetheart. The bad man's gone. Forever." Jacob looked at Clara over the child's head. "Forever. No one's going to hurt your family again, I promise." The hours that followed blurred together. Nathan and Jacob dealt with the bodies while Clara cleaned the cabin, scrubbing Wallace's blood from the floor with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The children helped in small ways, Thomas hauling water, Lily sweeping glass, their presence a comfort even in the grim work. By afternoon, the deputy marshal arrived from Cedar Ridge with a posse of 6 men. They took statements, examined the scene, and loaded the surviving attackers into a wagon bound for the territorial jail. "Stone's men, no doubt about it," the deputy confirmed, a stocky man named Porter with kind eyes and a handlebar mustache. Wallace was his top enforcer after Kane turned witness. Guess he figured he'd recover what he could before the whole operation collapsed. "Will there be trouble?" Clara asked. "For defending my home." "Ma'am, you've got a dead man in your cabin, but you've also got 6 witnesses saying he kicked in your door with murder in his eyes." Porter shook his head. "Any jury in the territory would call this justified. You won't face charges." Relief washed through her, but it was thin and cold. Justified or not, she'd watched a man die in her home. Watched her son nearly die trying to protect her. Some things couldn't be fixed by legal verdicts. After the posse left, Jacob found Clara standing by William's grave behind the cabin. She'd carved the marker herself 3 years ago, rough letters in rougher wood. William Jennings, beloved husband and father, 1845 to 1880. "I keep thinking about what Thomas did," Clara said without turning around. "Charging a man 3 times his size with nothing but a knife. He could have died. He almost did. But he didn't." "Because you showed up." Clara's voice cracked. "What if you'd been 5 minutes later? What if Nathan's signal hadn't reached you? What if—" "Don't." Jacob moved to stand beside her close enough to touch, but giving her space. "Don't torture yourself with what-ifs. I've done that for 5 years, and it's a road that leads nowhere good. He's 10 years old. He should be worrying about fishing and schoolwork, not whether he'll have to fight grown men to protect his mother." "He's 10 years old, and he's the bravest person I've ever met." Jacob's voice was firm. "You raised him right, Clara. You and William both. When the moment came, he didn't run, didn't freeze. He acted. Not every grown man has that in him." Clara finally turned to face him. Her eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted, but beneath the weariness burned something fierce. "I can't do this alone anymore. I thought I could. Thought I had to. But today proved me wrong." She took a shaking breath. "I need help, Jacob. I need someone to share this weight with." "Is that what you want? A partner in the practical work?" "I want more than that, and it terrifies me." Clara's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I look at you, and I see possibility. A future I stopped believing in. But every time I reach for it, I see William's face. See my children losing another father. See myself burying another husband." "Clara, I'm not finished." She held up her hand. "I need to say this or I never will. The day William died, a part of me died with him. I've been walking around for 3 years with a hole in my chest where my heart used to be. I thought that was just how it would be forever. Hollow, numb, going through the motions of living without actually feeling alive." She stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat of his body, close enough to see the emotion blazing in his blue eyes. "Then you showed up half dead in the snow. And somehow, against every instinct telling me to push you away, you got under my skin. Made me feel things I thought I'd never feel again. Made me want things I'd given up on wanting." "What things?" Jacob's voice was rough. "A partner. A protector. Someone to grow old with." Clara's hand came up, resting against his chest, feeling his heart pound beneath her palm. "Someone who looks at me like I'm precious instead of pitiful, like I'm strong instead of broken." "You are strong, strongest woman I've ever known. Then why am I so scared?" Jacob covered her hand with his own, pressing it tighter against his heart. "Because love is terrifying. It means giving someone the power to destroy you and trusting them not to. It means choosing hope over protection every single day." "Is that what this is? Love? I don't know what else to call it." Jacob's other hand came up, cupping her face with infinite gentleness. "I've known you less than 2 months. We've spent more of that time apart than together. But somehow, you've become the first thing I think about when I wake up and the last thing I think about before I sleep. If that's not love, it's the closest I've come to it since Margaret died." Clara felt tears threatening again. "I'm not Margaret. I can't be her replacement." "I'm not looking for a replacement. I'm looking for a new beginning." Jacob's thumb traced her cheekbone, wiping away a tear she hadn't felt fall. "Margaret will always have a piece of my heart, just like William will always have a piece of yours. But hearts are bigger than we think. There's room for old love and new." Thomas called it soft-hearted. Clara said, a watery laugh escaping her. Said I was soft-hearted but too stubborn to admit it. Smart boy. He is. Clara drew a shaky breath. He asked me once if you were going to leave. I told him people always leave. That we can only count on ourselves. What would you tell him now? Clara looked up at this man who had faced down killers for her, who had promised her son combat lessons and her daughter fishing trips, who stood in front of her husband's grave and asked not for forgetting, but for moving forward. I'd tell him that sometimes when you're very lucky, people stay. Jacob leaned down, pressing his forehead against hers. Is that a yes? It's a maybe, a strong maybe. Clara smiled despite the tears still tracking down her cheeks. We're still getting to know each other. There's still a trial to get through, a ranch to sort out, children to consider. I won't rush this, Jacob. I can't. I'm not going anywhere. Promise. On my life. Clara rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his brief, tentative, a first step rather than a destination. When she pulled back, Jacob's eyes were bright with something she could only call joy. Well now, he murmured. That was worth waiting for. Don't get used to it. I'm still making up my mind about you. Take all the time you need. I've got nothing but time. From the cabin, Lily's voice carried across the cold air. Mama Thomas won't let me have the last biscuit. Clara laughed, the sound startling in its genuineness. I'm being summoned. So I hear. Jacob offered his arm. Shall we? She took it, and together they walked back toward the cabin where her children waited, where dinner needed making, where the ordinary business of living continued, despite everything that had happened. Behind them, William's grave stood silent in the fading light. And if Clara could have seen what she couldn't know, she might have noticed the way the winter wind seemed gentler. There, warmer, as if something or someone offered its blessing on the new chapter beginning to unfold. The weeks leading up to Garrett Stone's trial passed in a blur of preparation and cautious hope. Jacob split his time between his ranch and Clara's homestead, riding the 30 miles between them like a man possessed. Nathan Crow remained a constant shadow, never intrusive, but always present, his silent vigilance a comfort Clara had stopped pretending she didn't need. Thomas had begun following Jacob around like a shadow himself, peppering the man with questions about ranching, about horses, about the war Jacob rarely discussed. Clara watched their growing bond with a mixture of gratitude and grief. Gratitude that her son had found a man worth looking up to. Grief that William couldn't be that man. One evening she found them behind the barn, Jacob teaching Thomas how to properly hold a rifle. Breathe out slow, Jacob was saying. Squeeze the trigger, don't pull. Let the shot surprise you. Thomas nodded, face tight with concentration. The rifle cracked, and a tin can 50 yards away jumped off its fence post. Good shot. Jacob's approval was quiet but genuine. You've got a steady hand. Pa taught me to shoot when I was 8. Thomas lowered the rifle, his voice careful. He said every man should know how to protect what's his. He was right. You think he'd mind you teaching me, I mean, instead of him? Jacob was silent for a moment. Clara held her breath unseen around the corner of the barn. I think your pa would want you to learn from whoever could teach you best, and I think he'd be proud of the man you're becoming. Jacob paused. I'm not trying to replace him, Thomas. No one could. But I'd like to be someone you can count on, if you'll let me. Thomas considered this with the gravity of someone far older than 10. Mama says you make her smile. She hasn't smiled much since Pa died. I've noticed that about her. If you hurt her, I'll kill you. The words came out flat, matter of fact. I know I'm just a kid. I know you could stop me easy. But I'd try. I'd die trying. Clara's heart clenched. Her son offering murder as a declaration of love. Jacob didn't laugh, didn't dismiss the threat. Instead, he knelt to meet Thomas's eyes directly. I believe you would. And that's exactly the kind of man your mother needs, protecting her someone who'd give everything for her, no questions asked. He held out his hand. I give you my word, Thomas. I will never intentionally hurt your mother. And if I ever fail that promise, I'll hand you the gun myself." Thomas studied Jacob's extended hand for a long moment. Then slowly he took it. Deal. Clara slipped away before they could see her tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Something had shifted between her son and this stranger-turned-ally turned something more. Something that felt dangerously like family. The trial began on a gray February morning, the territorial courthouse in Cheyenne packed with spectators hungry for justice or spectacle. Clara sat in the front row. Jacob on one side, the children left safely at the Mercer Ranch under Nathan's watchful eye. Garrett Stone looked diminished in the defendant's chair. The arrogant land baron who had terrorized a territory sat hunched and gray-stripped of the power that had made him fearsome. His expensive suit hung loose on a frame that had shed weight in custody. Clara felt nothing when she looked at him. She'd expected rage, perhaps satisfaction at seeing him brought low. Instead, there was only emptiness. This man had ordered her husband's death, had tried to steal her land, had sent men to kill her children. And yet, sitting here watching him face justice, she felt hollow. "You all right?" Jacob murmured, his hand finding hers. "I don't know what I am." The prosecution laid out its case with methodical precision. Silas Kane Stone's former enforcer took the stand and testified in exchange for a life sentence instead of hanging. His account of William's murder was clinical, detached, a business transaction, just as Jacob had said. "Mr. Stone gave the order personally," Kane said, avoiding Clara's eyes. "Said Jennings was holding up progress, said we should make it look like an accident. Tree work's dangerous, things happen." "And the attack on Mr. Jacob Mercer?" "Same thing. Mercer wouldn't sell the North Fork property. Stone wanted it. So Stone told us to take care of it." "Take care of it how?" "Beat him, take his papers, leave him in the snow to freeze." Kane shrugged. "Would have worked too if that widow hadn't found him." Clara's grip on Jacob's hand tightened. That widow. As if she were incidental to the story. As if she hadn't changed everything by dragging a dying man through the snow. Other witnesses followed. Homesteaders who'd been burned out. Ranchers who'd faced Stone's negotiations. Bank clerks who'd helped falsify documents. The web of corruption and violence stretched wider than anyone had imagined. Through it all, Stone sat silent, his lawyer mounting only token objections. The evidence was overwhelming. The outcome was never in doubt. On the third day, Clara was called to testify. She walked to the witness stand on legs that felt like water, acutely aware of every eye in the courtroom fixed upon her. The same people who had shunned her, whispered about her, refused her service. Now they watched her with something approaching respect. "Mrs. Jennings." The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed man named Hollister, approached with a folder of documents. "Can you tell the court about the night your husband died?" Clara had told the story 100 times. To the sheriff, to the insurance company, to herself in the dark hours when sleep wouldn't come. But telling it here in this room with Stone watching felt different, heavier, more real. December 14, 1880. William left for work at the logging camp before dawn. He was supposed to be home by supper. Her voice remained steady through sheer force of will. "When he didn't come, I figured they'd run late. Weather was turning bad. I went to bed early, told the children we'd see Papa in the morning." "And when morning came?" "The foreman came knocking before sunrise. Said there'd been an accident. A tree fell wrong, caught William beneath it." Clara's throat tightened. "He said William died quick. Didn't suffer. I believed him. And now I know he lied. Now I know my husband lay dying in the snow for hours while I slept safe and warm." Clara looked directly at Stone for the first time. "Now I know this man gave the order to murder him." Stone's expression didn't change. Empty eyes in an empty face. "Mrs. Jennings, can you describe the attack on your homestead by Mr. Stone's men last month?" Clara told it all. The destroyed chickens. The threatening notes. The morning when 6 armed men came to kill her children and steal whatever secrets they thought she possessed. She described Thomas's charge with the knife, Jacob's arrival, the gunfight that left bodies cooling in her dooryard. When she finished, the courtroom was silent. Somewhere in the back, a woman was crying quietly. No further questions. Stone's lawyer, a thin man with nervous hands, approached the stand. "Mrs. Jennings, isn't it true that you developed a romantic relationship with Mr. Mercer while he was staying at your home?" Jacob tensed beside where he sat. Clara saw his jaw clench. "Mr. Mercer was injured and needed care. I provided it. And nothing more. Nothing more while he was under my roof. But since then," Clara lifted her chin, "since then, Mr. Mercer has become important to me and my children. I fail to see what that has to do with your client's crimes. I'm simply establishing that you might have motivation to color your testimony, to support Mr. Mercer's claims about my client. Your client had my husband murdered." Clara's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. "He tried to have Mr. Mercer murdered. He sent men to kill my children. I don't need motivation to tell the truth about him. The truth speaks for itself." The lawyer retreated, clearly outmatched. Stone whispered something in his ear, but the man only shook his head. Clara stepped down from the witness stand and returned to her seat. Jacob's hand found hers again, squeezing gently. "You were magnificent," he murmured. "I was terrified." "That's what made it magnificent." The verdict came on the 5th day. Guilty on all counts. Murder, conspiracy, fraud, intimidation. A litany of sins that would keep Garrett Stone in prison until he died. The judge's voice rang through the courtroom. "Garrett Stone, you have been found guilty by a jury of your peers of crimes too numerous and heinous to catalog fully here. You preyed upon the innocent. You murdered for profit. You terrorized a community that should have been able to trust in the rule of law." Stone showed no reaction. His empty gaze remained fixed on some point beyond the judge, beyond the courtroom, beyond anything human. "It is the sentence of this court that you be hanged by the neck until dead, execution to be carried out in 30 days. May God have mercy on your soul, for this court has none to offer." Clara waited to feel something. Triumph, relief, satisfaction. Instead, there was only exhaustion. A chapter had closed, but the book of her grief remained unfinished. Outside the courthouse, crowds had gathered. Word of the verdict had spread fast. People pressed forward, wanting to shake Jacob's hand, to offer Clara words of support. Faces she recognized from Cedar Ridge, people who had turned their backs on her weeks ago, now approached with shame in their eyes. Martha Pritchard, the banker's wife, who had called her a harlot, pushed through the crowd. Clara braced herself for another attack. "Mrs. Jennings." Martha's voice shook. "Mrs. Jennings, I owe you an apology." Clara said nothing. "I believed the gossip. I spread it further. I was cruel to you when you needed kindness." Tears streaked Martha's powdered cheeks. "I was wrong. I was so wrong. Can you ever forgive me?" The question hung between them. Clara thought of the store that wouldn't sell her flour, the signs on the road, the isolation that had nearly broken her. "Forgiveness takes time, Mrs. Pritchard, but I'm willing to try." Martha nodded, more tears falling. "That's more than I deserve. Thank you." Others followed. Harold Miller from the general store, Edith Cole, the schoolteacher's wife. Even Reverend Hayes had in hand humility in his bearing. "I judged you unfairly, Mrs. Jennings. I let gossip cloud my judgment when I should have seen the truth." The Reverend's voice was heavy with genuine remorse. "The Lord teaches us to aid the stranger and comfort the afflicted. You did both, and I condemned you for it. I am truly sorry." Clara accepted each apology with grace she didn't fully feel. The wounds were too fresh, the scars too deep. But she recognized the courage it took to admit wrongdoing, and she honored it, even when her heart remained guarded. Jacob stood beside her through it all, a steady presence amid the swirling emotions. When the crowd finally thinned, he guided her to a quiet corner of the courthouse steps. "How are you holding up?" "I don't know." Clara leaned against him, suddenly exhausted. "I thought I'd feel different. Free, maybe. Or at peace. But I just feel empty." Justice doesn't fill the hole grief leaves behind. It just stops the bleeding. Is that what this is, stopped bleeding? It's a start. Jacob brushed a strand of hair from her face. The rest comes with time, with living, with choosing to move forward even when it hurts. Clara looked up at him, at this man who had stumbled into her life and somehow become essential to it. "I don't know how to move forward. I've been standing still for 3 years." "Then we learn together." Jacob's voice was soft but certain. "One step at a time. No rushing, no expectations. Just one foot in front of the other until walking feels natural again. And if I stumble, then I catch you. And if I stumble, you catch me. That's how partnership works." Clara felt something shift in her chest. Not the frozen weight lifting that would take longer, but a crack in the ice. A small fissure where warmth might eventually seep through. "Take me home, Jacob. I want to see my children." The ride back to the Mercer Ranch took most of the day. Clara dozed against Jacob's shoulder in the wagon, exhausted beyond words. When they arrived, Thomas and Lily came running before the horses had fully stopped. "Mama!" Lily launched herself into Clara's arms. "Nathan taught me to track rabbits, and Thomas shot a tin can from really far away, and we made biscuits, but Thomas burned his." "I did not burn them," Thomas protested, but he was smiling. "They were just well done." Clara gathered her children close, breathing in their familiar scents, grounding herself in their solid living presence. Stone was going to hang. William's murder would be avenged. But here in the arms of her children was where justice truly lived. "Is it over, Mama?" Thomas asked quietly. "Really over. It's over." Clara pulled back to look at her son's face. "Stone will never hurt anyone again." "Good." Thomas's expression was grave but satisfied. "Pa can rest now." That night, after the children were asleep in the guest rooms, Jacob had prepared, Clara found herself wandering the halls of the Mercer Ranch house. It was grander than anything she'd ever known. 20 rooms, fine furniture, glass windows instead of oiled paper. Everything William had never been able to give her. She paused before a portrait in the main hall. A young woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, a baby in her arms. "Margaret and Rose." Jacob's voice came from behind her. "Painted the year before they died." Clara studied the portrait. She was beautiful. She was. And kind and patient and everything I didn't deserve. Jacob came to stand beside her. "I hung this portrait to remember them. Some days it brings comfort. Other days it brings only pain." "Do you still love her?" "Part of me always will, just as part of you will always love William." Jacob turned to face Clara. "But love isn't finite. It doesn't run out when you give it to someone new. It just grows, makes room." Clara touched the frame gently. "If she could see us now, what would she think?" "I know what she'd think, because she told me." Jacob pulled a folded paper from his pocket, worn soft with handling. "She left me a letter. I found it after you and I. After things began to change between us." "What does it say?" "She tells me not to bury myself with her. Tells me to find someone who makes me laugh again." Jacob's voice roughened. "She tells me that loving someone new doesn't mean loving her less. It means honoring her by living fully." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "She sounds like a wise woman." "She was. Wiser than me, that's certain." Jacob took her hand, pressing it between both of his. "I'm not showing you this to pressure you. I'm showing you because I want you to understand, if we build something together, we're not betraying the people we've lost. We're honoring them by choosing life over grief." "I want to believe that." "Then believe it. Even if it's hard. Even if some days you can't feel it. Belief is a choice we make over and over until it becomes truth. Clara looked from the portrait to Jacob's face. Different from William in every way. Darker hair, harder edges, a life of luxury instead of struggle. But the same steadiness in his eyes. The same capacity for devotion. "I need to go home," she said finally. "Back to my homestead. The children need routine, and I need to stand in my own space for a while. Figure out who I am now that the fighting's done." "I understand. But I want you to visit, often. I want the children to know you better." Clara took a breath. "And when I'm ready, when I know my own heart for certain, I want to have a real conversation about our future." Jacob raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I'll wait as long as it takes." "It might be a long time." "I've got nothing but time, Clara. And nowhere I'd rather spend it than waiting for you." They left the next morning, Clara and her children in the wagon, Jacob riding alongside. The journey home felt different than the journey out, lighter somehow, despite everything that had happened. The world had changed. Justice had been served. And somewhere in the mess of grief and hope and fear, the seeds of something new had taken root. When they crested the final hill and the Jennings homestead came into view, Lily gasped with delight. "Look, Mama, someone fixed our chicken coop." Clara stared. The destroyed structure had been completely rebuilt, larger than before, with a proper roof and a fence to keep predators out. Fresh lumber gleamed in the winter sun. "Jacob. Nathan and some of my men came out last week." Jacob's tone was carefully casual. "Figured you'd need somewhere to keep new chickens. There's a dozen layers waiting in the barn. Gift from the Sullivan Ranch down the valley. They heard about your troubles and wanted to help." Clara felt her throat tighten. "You didn't have to." "I know. I wanted to." Jacob pulled his horse alongside the wagon. "No strings attached, no expectations, just neighbors helping neighbors." Thomas had jumped down from the wagon running to inspect the new coop. "There's a rooster too, a big red one." "Every flock needs a rooster," Jacob said mildly. "Protection." Clara climbed down from the wagon, walking slowly toward the rebuilt structure. She ran her hand over the smooth wood, still smelling of fresh sawdust. "It's better than the old one," she murmured. "It should be. Nathan's a perfectionist." Jacob dismounted, joining her by the coop. "I hope you're not angry. I know you've got your pride." Clara kissed him. It wasn't like their first kiss, tentative testing. This was full and firm, a declaration, as much as an expression. She felt Jacob's surprise, then his arms coming around her, pulling her close. When they finally broke apart, both breathing harder than strictly necessary, Jacob's eyes were bright with wonder. What was that for? For being kind when you didn't have to be. For thinking of my children. For rebuilding something that was broken without asking for credit or thanks. Clara rested her forehead against his. "For being exactly the man I hoped you'd be." "Does this mean you figured out your heart?" "I'm getting closer." Clara stepped back, but kept hold of his hand. "Stay for supper. The children will want you to see the new chickens properly." Jacob's smile spread slowly across his face. "Yes, ma'am. Whatever you say." Inside the cabin, everything was as they'd left it, clean, quiet, waiting. But something had changed. The emptiness that had haunted these rooms since William's death felt less oppressive, less final. Clara moved through the familiar space, touching the table William had built, the chair where he'd smoked his pipe, the window where he'd stood watching for her return. Each touch was an acknowledgement, a honoring. "I loved you," she whispered to the empty room. "I will always love you, but I have to live now, for the children, for myself, and maybe if I'm very lucky for someone new." The winter wind moaned softly outside, but Clara could have sworn she heard an echo of William's laugh beneath it. An approval, a blessing. She wiped her eyes and went to make supper. Spring came slow to Wyoming that year, fighting winter for every inch of ground. But by late March, the first green shoots were pushing through the frost-hardened earth, and Clara found herself standing at William's grave with a decision heavy in her heart. "I'm going to say yes," she told the wooden marker, her breath misting in the cold morning air. "Jacob asked me last night, properly on one knee the whole thing. Thomas was watching from the loft pretending not to. Lily clapped so loud she scared the chickens." The wind stirred the bare branches overhead. Clara pulled her shawl tighter. "I know what you'd say if you could. You'd say life's for the living. You'd say the children need a father. You'd tell me to stop being stubborn and grab happiness with both hands before it slips away." She laughed softly, the sound catching in her throat. "You always knew me better than I knew myself." She knelt beside the grave, pressing her palm against the cold earth. "I'll never forget you, Will. Never stop loving you. But I've got to move forward now. The children are watching. They're learning from me how to handle grief, how to face the future. I can't teach them to hide from happiness because they're scared of losing it." A robin landed on the fence nearby, head cocked as if listening. Clara watched it for a moment, remembering how William used to whistle at birds, how Lily had inherited his gift for mimicking their calls. "Jacob's a good man. Different from you, but good. He'll take care of us. And maybe—" She paused, the words difficult to form. "Maybe I can take care of him too. He's got his own ghosts, his own empty rooms. Maybe together we can fill them." She stood slowly, brushing dirt from her skirts. "Goodbye isn't the right word. You're never really gone, not while the children carry your face and I carry your memory. So I'll just say, thank you. For loving me. For giving me Thomas and Lily. For being the kind of man worth mourning this long." The robin sang 3 clear notes, then flew away toward the rising sun. Clara watched it go, feeling something loosen in her chest. Not grief releasing that would stay with her always, but the tight knot of guilt she'd carried since the first moment she'd felt something for Jacob Mercer. She walked back to the cabin where her children waited, where breakfast needed making, where an ordinary day stretched ahead full of ordinary tasks. But nothing felt ordinary anymore. Everything felt new. Jacob arrived that afternoon, riding up the lane with a wagon full of supplies and a nervous energy Clara had never seen in him before. "You look like a man about to face a firing squad," she said from the porch, arms crossed, hiding her smile. "Might prefer that to what I'm about to do." He dismounted, leaving the supplies for later. "Did you think about what I asked?" "I did." "And?" Clara made him wait, watching the hope and fear war across his features. This proud man, this wealthy rancher who commanded respect throughout the territory, reduced to nervous uncertainty by a widow's answer. "Thomas thinks you'll make a decent father with proper training. His words, not mine." Jacob's expression flickered. "That's encouraging." "Lily wants to know if she can call you Papa right away, or if she has to wait until after the wedding." "I told her she could call me whatever felt right." "I know, she told me. Also told me you promised her a pony." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Were you planning to mention that?" "In my defense, she's very persuasive." Clara descended the porch steps, slowly closing the distance between them. Jacob stood rooted in place, barely breathing. "I went to William's grave this morning," she said. "Talked to him for a long time. Told him about you. About us." "What did you tell him?" "That I'm going to marry you." Clara stopped inches from him, close enough to see the pulse jumping in his throat. "If you'll still have me." Jacob's control shattered. He pulled her into his arms, crushing her against him, his face buried in her hair. "I'll have you. Today, tomorrow, forever. However long you'll let me." Clara held on just as tight, feeling his heart pound against her chest, matching rhythm with her own. This was real. This was happening. After 3 years of frozen grief, she was choosing life again. "There'll be conditions," she mumbled against his shoulder. "Name them." "The children keep their father's name. Thomas William Jennings, Lily Rose Jennings. They add Mercer if they want, but Hayes comes first." "Done." "This homestead stays mine. Separate from your ranch, separate from your holdings. Something to pass down that's purely from their father's line. Already drew up the papers. Your land, your name forever. Clara pulled back to look at his face. You were that confident I'd say yes. I was that hopeful. Jacob brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. Anything else? Just one thing. Clara's voice softened. Love me, Jacob. Not because I saved your life. Not because you feel obligated. Love me because you choose to every day, even when I'm stubborn and proud and difficult. That's not a condition. That's just truth. Jacob kissed her forehead, her nose the corner of her mouth. I've loved you since you told me self-pity wouldn't heal me faster. Maybe before that. Maybe from the moment I opened my eyes and saw your face. That's the fever talking. That's my heart talking. He tilted her chin up, meeting her eyes. Let me prove it to you. Not just today, but every day for the rest of our lives. Let me show you what you mean to me until you can't doubt it anymore. Clara felt tears threatening and blinked them back. I might take some convincing. Good thing I'm patient. From the cabin window, two faces watched the scene below. Thomas stood with his arm around Lily's shoulders, expressions solemn, but not sad. They're getting married for real? Lily asked. Looks like it. Does that mean Mr. Jacob is our papa now? Thomas considered the question with the gravity of a 10-year-old carrying responsibilities beyond his years. He's something. Not papa, nobody can be papa, but something important. Can I call him Pa, like we talked about? I reckon that'd be all right. Thomas paused. Mama looks happy. Haven't seen her look happy like that in a long time. She was happy with Papa. Yeah, she was. Thomas watched Jacob lift their mother off her feet, spinning her around while she laughed. Maybe she can be happy again, just different happy. Lily pressed her nose against the glass. I'm going to ask him about my pony. Give them a minute, Lil. They're having a moment. What kind of moment? A grown-up kind, the kind where they need privacy. Lily giggled. You mean kissing? Thomas made a face. Maybe. Don't look. They both kept looking anyway. The wedding took place 6 weeks later in the small white church in Cedar Ridge. The same church that had shunned Clara, the same town that had turned its back. Now they gathered to witness her new beginning. Clara wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved through years and miles and hardship. Blue flowers embroidered on white cotton, simpler than anything Jacob could have bought her, more precious for its history. You look beautiful, Martha Jenkins whispered, adjusting Clara's veil in the small room behind the altar. The elderly woman had become something like a mother to Clara in the weeks since the trial, her quiet support a balm after years of isolation. I look terrified, Clara corrected. That's part of beautiful. Shows you understand what you're promising. Thomas appeared in the doorway, uncomfortable in his Sunday suit, his father's pocket watch chain visible against his vest. He'd insisted on wearing it on, carrying something of William's into this new chapter. They're ready for you, Mama. Clara took a deep breath. How do I look? Like you're about to cry. Thomas? You asked. But his expression softened. You look like Mama. That's always been enough. Clara crossed to her son, cupping his face in her hands. In the past months, he'd shot up 2 inches. Soon he'd be taller than her. Soon he'd be a man in truth, not just in the responsibilities he carried. I love you, Thomas. You know that. I know. This doesn't change anything between us. You and Lily will always be first in my heart. I know that too. Thomas covered her hands with his own, the gesture startlingly adult. It's okay, Mama. You don't have to keep explaining. I understand. When did you get so grown up? Somewhere between Papa dying and today. Thomas's voice was steady. You did good raising us. Pa would be proud. I'm proud. Clara pulled him into a fierce hug, not caring about wrinkling the dress or mussing his carefully combed hair. Her boy. her brave, serious, loving boy. "Come on," Thomas said, finally pulling back. "Mr. Jacob looks like he's about to faint. Better put him out of his misery." They walked to the altar together, Thomas on one side, Lily on the other, a family approaching their future hand in hand. The church was full neighbors, ranchers, townspeople who had once shunned them, now come to witness redemption. Jacob stood at the front, Nathan Crow beside him, as best man, looking exactly as terrified as Clara felt. When he saw her coming down the aisle, his face transformed. Terror became wonder. Wonder became joy. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Hayes began, his voice carrying through the hushed church, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of this man and this woman in holy matrimony." Clara barely heard the words. She was looking at Jacob, at the way his eyes never left her face, at the slight tremble in his hands when he took hers. "Do you, Jacob Mercer, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do you part?" "I do." The words came out strong, certain. "And do you, Clara Jennings, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do you part?" Clara thought of William, of the first time he'd kissed her clumsy and eager behind her father's barn, of their wedding day, smaller than this, poorer than this, but burning with the same fire, of his frozen body in the snow and the 3 years of ice that had followed. She thought of Jacob, of finding him dying by the creek, of dragging him home, of the slow thaw of her heart as she'd watched him carve toys and chop wood and become someone her children could trust. 2 loves, 2 lives, 1 heart big enough to hold them both. "I do." The ring Jacob slipped onto her finger was simple gold, engraved inside with a date and 2 words, "New beginning." "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Jacob kissed her softly, reverently, a promise more than a passion. Lily cheered. Thomas smiled. The congregation applauded. And somewhere, Clara could have sworn she felt William's blessing like spring sunshine on her face. The reception spilled from the church into the town square, where tables had been set with food brought by neighbors who once wouldn't sell Clara flour. She accepted their congratulations with grace, their apologies with patience, their offerings of friendship with cautious hope. "Quite the turnout," Jacob murmured, appearing at her side with 2 cups of punch. "Guilt makes generous guests." "You're being cynical." "I'm being realistic." But Clara softened the words with a smile. "Give me time. Trust takes longer to rebuild than chicken coops." Jacob handed her a cup. "As long as you need. I'm not going anywhere." "Neither am I." Clara clinked her cup against his. "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings." Across the square, Thomas was teaching a group of younger boys how to whittle a skill he'd learned from Jacob over the winter months. Lily sat on Nathan Crow's shoulders, laughing as the silent man navigated through the crowd with exaggerated care. "They're going to be all right," Clara said, watching her children. "Better than all right. They've got a strong mother. They've got a village now, a real one, not the one that turned away when we needed help." Clara looked at the gathering crowd. Old enemies become tentative friends, strangers become neighbors. People aren't always good, but sometimes they find their way back to goodness. Spoken like a preacher's daughter? Spoken like a woman who's seen the worst and chosen to believe in the best anyway. Clara set down her cup. "Dance with me, husband." "There's no music." "There's always music. You just have to listen for it." They danced in the middle of the square, making their own rhythm, drawing bemused looks from some guests and tender smiles from others. Jacob held her close, and Clara let herself be held. Let herself lean into something solid after years of standing alone. "I keep waiting to wake up," Jacob admitted quietly. Keep expecting to open my eyes and find myself still frozen by that creek dreaming you while I died. You're not dreaming. How can you be sure? Because dreams don't come with children who need feeding and livestock that needs tending and in-laws who want to meet you next month. Clara laughed at his expression. My sister in Kansas. She's insisting on a visit. You never mentioned a sister. There's a lot we haven't mentioned. That's what the next 50 years are for. 50 years? Jacob pulled back slightly to look at her face. You're already planning that far ahead. I'm planning forever. You got a problem with that? No, ma'am, not a single one. The afternoon faded into evening. Guests departed in waves, leaving well wishes and wedding gifts behind. Martha and Henry Jenkins were among the last to go, Martha pressing a kiss to Clara's cheek. Your mother would be proud, the old woman whispered. Wherever she is, she's smiling down. Thank you, Martha, for everything. That's what family does. Martha patted her hand. We're your family now. Don't forget it. By nightfall, only the Mercer-Jennings household remained. They rode back to Clara's homestead together. Hers still would always be hers, but shared now with Jacob and the future they'd build. The cabin glowed warm in the darkness fire, already lit by Nathan, who'd ridden ahead to prepare. He nodded once at Jacob, touched the brim of his hat to Clara, and melted into the shadows without a word. That man gives me shivers, Clara said, watching him disappear. Good shivers or bad shivers? Honest shivers. He's loyal to you. That makes him loyal to us. But I wouldn't want to be on his bad side. No one would. Jacob helped the children down from the wagon. All right, you two. Bed. But I'm not tired, Lily protested even as she yawned widely. Bed anyway. Tomorrow's a big day. What's tomorrow? First day of our new life. Jacob knelt to her level. And I believe someone was promised pony lessons? Lily's exhaustion vanished. Really tomorrow. If your mother approves. Both children turned to Clara with pleading eyes. She pretended to consider enjoying the rare moment of leverage. Chores first, then lessons. Yes, Mama. Lily launched herself at Clara, hugging fiercely. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thomas held back, maintaining his dignity, but Clara saw the excitement he was trying to hide. You'll teach me too, the way you've been teaching me, shooting. Everything I know, Jacob promised. Riding, roping, ranching. You'll be running this place by the time you're 15. This place is Mama's. This place is family's. That includes you. Jacob extended his hand. Partners. Thomas shook it solemnly. Partners. Clara watched the exchange with a full heart. Not replacement. Jacob had never tried to replace William. Something new. Something built on the foundation of loss, but reaching toward light. After the children were settled, Clara and Jacob sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket against the cold, watching stars emerge one by one. Scared? Jacob asked. Terrified. You? Same. Good. Means we're taking it seriously. Jacob laughed softly. I spent 5 years alone in that big ranch house. 20 rooms and not a soul to share them with. Ate alone, slept alone. Watched the seasons change without anyone to point them out to. And now? Now I've got a wife, 2 children, a silent foreman who keeps appearing from nowhere, and a cabin that's smaller than my dining room. Jacob pulled her closer. I've never been happier in my life. It won't always be easy. We'll fight. We'll disagree. I'll be stubborn, and you'll be overbearing. Probably. The children will test us. The ranch will demand attention. The homestead will need work. There won't be enough hours in the day or patience in our hearts. Also probably. Clara turned to face him. You still want this, knowing all that. I want this because of all that. Jacob cradled her face in his hands. I didn't fall in love with a peaceful life, Clara. I fell in love with you. Stubborn, proud, fierce, beautiful you. The fights, the challenges, the endless demands, they're part of the package. Part of what makes this real instead of just a dream. You're going to regret those words someday. Maybe, but I'll never regret this moment. He kissed her slowly, thoroughly, with all the promise of the years stretching ahead. Welcome to our new life, Mrs. Mercer. It's Mrs. Jennings Mercer, and don't you forget it. Yes, ma'am, wouldn't dare. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars wheeled overhead. The same stars that had watched over Clara's grief, over Jacob's loneliness, over two broken people finding their way back to wholeness. Jacob. Thank you. For not giving up. For coming back. For believing this was possible when I couldn't. Thank you for saving my life. Not just in the snow, every day since. Clara rested her head against his shoulder, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath her cheek. The cabin was warm behind them. The children were safe within. The future stretched ahead, uncertain, but no longer frightening. I think I'm going to like being married to you, she said finally. Only think, I'm cautious. It's part of my charm. Jacob's laughter echoed into the night. That it is, Clara. That it is. Inside the cabin, Thomas lay awake in the loft listening to the murmur of voices from the porch. Beside him, Lily slept deeply, clutching the wooden horse Jacob had carved months ago when he was still a stranger dying by the fire. Thomas reached into his pocket and pulled out his father's ring on its leather cord. He'd worn it every day since the funeral, a reminder of the man who'd taught him to be brave, to protect, to love fiercely, even when it hurt. Tomorrow, he'd give it to Jacob, not to replace Papa. Nothing could do that, but to welcome him into the family. To say what words couldn't. You belong here now. You're one of us. Thomas closed his fingers around the cool metal and smiled in the darkness. Papa would understand. Papa would approve. And somewhere in the star-scattered sky, Thomas was certain his father was watching, nodding finally at peace. The winter that had nearly destroyed them had passed. Spring had come at last, not just to the Wyoming hills, but to the hearts of a family forged in grief and reborn in love. Clara Jennings Mercer had found her second chance, and she intended to hold it with both hands until her very last breath. Not because she'd forgotten the past, but because she'd finally learned to embrace the future. Not because the pain had disappeared, but because joy had grown strong enough to carry it. Not because she was no longer afraid, but because she'd found something worth being brave for. A man who stayed, children who thrived, a life worth living, and that in the end was everything.